you. Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me. This is Eating the Elephant, Application Security when you're on a startup. I apologize for the title. I was listening to a lot of The Perfect Circle at the time. I work for Westpac New Zealand. Full disclosure, I'm forced to tell you this. The views and opinions expressed in this do not necessarily reflect that of my employer. I'm the manager for the security assurance team. We basically do all the things that aren't security operations or incident response, and I'll be told that we don't do consultant stuff either. The reason I'm here is we also do the secure development initiatives, which I'll be sharing in the second half of this talk. I've got a background as a penetration tester. I've done some software development, and don't tell anyone, but I've actually done some risk and policy stuff too. Cool, so I was motivated to give this talk because you might go to a lot of conferences and you hear about what all the cool, good new application security things that are the cool thing to do. You go back to your place of work and you're really keen to do these things, and then reality quickly hits. You're like, okay, this doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of things. The reason I say it's when you're not a startup is startups have like one or two apps, right? And maybe it's just one pipeline. So how do you actually roll out these really good new things when you have many legacy things? You might be, who knows, you might be 30 or 40 years old. The business, oh my goodness, oh no, I've put my foot in that. So I'll start by saying what is good, what might be the blockers, and my patented menu I'll be discussing in the second half. This is a trademark, so no one can use it. It's open source, but cool. So what are the current good things? The first one that I can't, actually, I'll start by saying, I've run through this a couple of times, and I've been told that I sound quite negative about these good things. I think they're really amazing. I think they're really cool. But yeah, there's the reality of it, and I'll be discussing that. Application security engineers are really cool. DevSecOps is also really cool. Yes, that's a magpie. So what are application security engineers? Typical job a job vacancy for an application security engineer looks a lot like a penetration tester. They know all the pen testing tools. They're probably a bit of a threat modeler, consultant-y person, and they also know code. They can probably write your code, make some scripts for you, some security scripts. And as you can probably tell by the icon, they maybe don't exist. So the really great thing about application security engineers is they're your snake in the grass. Like for a security team, like they can spot issues early. Like if you use the old waterfall model where everything's gated and you have a security consultant at the end and he goes, hey, oh no, what are you doing that for? And they either hand wave away your suggestions or they're like, oh, Steve, mate, this 2 months work, mate, what are you doing? So this application security engineer is supposed to catch these issues early, so they never really become issues. Probably the best thing about them is that they passively upskill the rest of your squad. They will make suggestions, and they'll just say the right things, and everyone else will learn, and so it all works amazingly. They're very, very popular with large tech firms. I'm not even going to say who does this. As you might have guessed, the cons are that they don't exist. Or they're gold-plated. Basically, your large tech companies have permanently open vacancies for these positions, mostly because they're amazing and they can't get enough people. But yeah, probably, there's probably a lot of people in this room that can qualify for this, but yeah, and downstairs maybe, but it's the only place they are. What's the other thing? DevSecOps. So we're probably all familiar with DevOps. It's like your infrastructure as code, your continuous integration, continuous deployment, pipeline-y stuff. It does all sorts of cool things. DevSecOps or SecDevOps or Secure DevOps or whatever you decide to call it is wrapping security around that stuff. You can do really cool things like put a security person in your pull requests. They might not understand the code, all the cool kids are using Go. I can't read it. But they can kind of see what you're doing. Often this is the first place you see a new feature. Go figure. In your build phases, you can pull in a fresh new image, like it might be the latest LTS with all your security patches. How cool is that? Your latest dependencies, so like maybe don't use that old version of Java 5 that nobody can replace, because if you try and even install the same one, for some reason that version of Java 5 works. Anyway, you can containerize everything, and you can maybe use Alpine and just install basically the bare necessities of what you need. It can, yeah, that's really good. In your testing phase, these are like all your scans. You need compliance and dependency, and God knows, you might even do some unit testing. These are all security-based, and you can catch issues. Probably the best part of this is you can like break your pipeline if something vulnerable happens. A lot of us forget about the availability part of CIA. Like if your node's getting smashed, you can like, because your infrastructure is code, you can like spin up a new node and like HA proxy everything, and your site doesn't go down. How cool is that? You're in production, and if your infrastructure is code, technically people don't need access to your production box. If you've got a problem in production, you just spin up a new one. This is all really awesome and amazing. It's probably pretty obvious. I'm going to pull this apart right now. So your pull request, right. So you might be, you might actually be part of the master branch, but like Dave like creates a separate repo and gets Larry to approve it for him, and then merges it later. Your fresh image might not be so fresh because like Larry had this version with the latest issue with the latest version, and so he pinned it 6 months ago and forgot to unpin it. You might have a Magpie developer that wants to install hipster.js. Hipster.js has 1,000 dependencies, and it makes it really, really hard to upgrade, so you just don't. Your minimal Docker, like, man, that's a real pain, isn't it? It's a real pain to have to install all your dependencies. So maybe just use the default Debian Docker. Like, it's got everything in there. Maybe your automated security testing is just testing, because nobody knew what the security test should be. Maybe you don't scale out because, or you do scale out, but like dynamically requesting TLS certificates is like hard, man. So we just turned it off. Maybe no one has access to production except for Dave, because like that part of the cookbook, like Dave just had trouble with. So, but he was able to figure out how to, cool. So you can probably tell, with DevOps, right, like we automate everything, but people are still there, right? You've just moved the people further away from production. And your people will let you down. And if you're anything like me, you're like, I can think of 100 technical solutions to this, but not everything needs to be automated. This is a fun fact. Okay, so I had a couple of other points. So another thing to this is not everything needs to be DevOps, right? You've got mature platforms. Who has mature platforms? They might have like feature upgrades every year. Like you don't, this is going to sound sacrilegious, but maybe you don't have to DevOps that thing. Maybe it takes longer to do that, and you've got time and money and people that you could spend on other things. So how do we, if we can't have application security engineers because they don't exist, and maybe it doesn't make sense to DevOps everything, like how do we make secure applications? And as I've hopefully made obvious, I think the base, you start from the start, and I think the issue is education and awareness. I probably haven't articulated this very well, but I think the issue is also visibility, and I'll explain why later. So my solution to this was what I call you can tell I've been hanging around with the chef people too much. I call it the secure development menu. Nothing on this is new. You've probably heard of all this stuff before. But the idea of this is that I have the menu and I go to a squad. It's got all these cool things on it and they can pick and choose what they want. The idea is it doesn't take very long and you don't have to embed yourself in the squad. You can just get them to choose the right thing, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. Anyway, so what's in the menu? So there's two parts to this. There's the education awareness part and the visibility part. So in the education awareness part I've had actually a lot of success with this one, the introduction to secure development. It's actually very similar to the first talk this morning, except theirs was way better. It just goes over OWASP Top 10. I think the best value from it is the examples. And you can kind of see the light bulbs go on when they actually see a vulnerability being executed. Because, a lot of developers might not have seen this, like everyone in this room probably has. But, and then you show them the code, and they're like, oh, yeah, cool. So this is actually mandatory. Ooh. New developers do this, and we've had some really good success with it. I won't dwell on this too long, because I know there's a talk later, other than to say Secure Code Warrior is really cool. This one, so we do introduction to penetration testing. So this was my solution to having AppSec Engineers. If you can't find someone that's done penetration testing, that's done professional coding, why not make some? We often forget that you can actually train people. Introduction to penetration testing is like taking someone from a squad and teaching them the basic penetration testing tools. I know there's lots of probably pen testers in there going, hey, what? It's real hard. I spent my whole life learning this. But sometimes, they just need to know the tools and they need to know the basic stuff. Special call out to the OWASP Juice Shop. It's like an open source app that has lots of vulnerable things on it. It's actually really cool. It's got a Heroku button, so you don't even have to worry about the infrastructure. You're going to remember to delete it. But another call out would be Pen Tester Labs has actually been a really cool tool as an ISO to teach people penetration testing. This one's pretty cool. So Capture the Flag is also like building rapport with squads and developers, and a lot of people don't like security teams, so they can kind of like you if you buy them pizza and you play Capture the Flag with them. You don't have to make your own Capture the Flag. There's actually a lot of resources where you can use someone else's. I enjoy using Facebook CTF. And the most successful one we've had was, it's like an open source intelligence one where we kind of just, I will hide flags and DNS queries and custom headers and stuff. It's actually really good fun. I didn't know where to put this one, but if you've been a consultant and you've done, so let's say you've done a pen test, and you found a thing, and you've told them the thing, and then you come back the next year, and they tell you, hey, we fixed the thing. And then you go and test it, and the thing is still there. This is quite valuable, and you sit down with the squads, and you fix the thing with them. Because obviously, you make the reports, and then you walk away. Oh, consultants, aren't you? So the second half is visibility. This is visibility for a security team to see what the squads are up to and hopefully to tell them off in a nice way. But it's also visibility of squads to their issues. And this can often get ignored from a security team. Security teams, they see their dashboards every day. Like you know, the minority report screens, and they're doing all this stuff. God knows banks love their tools. But the tools for a developer are like, you know, Visual Studio Code or Git and stuff, and they don't always see the security issues that you do. So that was kind of the idea of the visibility part. If you take anything away today, it's just how valuable attending like a security person attending a stand-up is. I've done this with quite a few squads, and the first one has been an hour of them like throwing questions at me about policies, standards, best practices, processes, and you'll very quickly as a security team realize where you're failing with your communication, and you'll also kind of see where, with that squad, where you should focus with them going forward. The main point, or the original point of attending a stand-up is to, when they raise features and they're talking about prioritizing their boards and stuff, the idea is that you raise the right questions and you're asking them the right questions. It's kind of like being an application security developer, but you know, you're just attending the stand-ups rather than being in the squad. Next one's threat modeling, and I don't mean this, like there's some really great resources here for threat modeling, but for this specific one, I'm talking about elevation of privilege, which is a sort of Microsoft open source card game. It's quite quick, and very quickly you sit down with the teams and they'll play it, and they'll very quickly understand where their weaknesses may be and where they can focus on. Actually, I think that John DeLeo has actually printed out some of these cards, and I think they're on the OWASP store. I understand. Maybe I'm lying. Cool. The other one of them is pull requests. So this is exactly like in the DevSecOps pipeline. You don't need to be DevOps to do this. You don't need to be agile even. You can just get yourself embedded in their pulls to master. Is it master or release? One of those things. I'm not always a developer. Cool. Static code analysis. Ooh, no one didn't get a perk out of anyone. All right, so I've had really mixed success with this. I was dubious about putting it here. These tools have a lot of false positives, a lot of false positives. The best strategy I've had is to sit down with the squad and with the first report that comes out of it and triage it with them to get them to understand those reports and then basically give ownership over to them. It's probably at this point I point out that conspicuously absent from this menu is penetration testing and code reviews. Those things don't go away. They're probably, you know, they're still useful. You still need to do them every year. But the idea is that these supplement those things and that, you know, you've got a little bit more assurance when you're pushing untested code out into production. This is dependency scanning, which is, you know, we pay a lot of attention to OS scanning and application scanning and seeing if there's any publicly available disclosures for these things, but dependency is gaining more traction, and I wish more people did it. OWASP have a really great tool, dependency check. SNCC is also a really cool tool, but special mention to JFrog X-Ray. It's signature-based and it's recursive, so your artifact repository might have a Docker container. It won't just look at the Docker container, it'll go through and look if it's using like a vulnerable version of glibc, and it'll tell you if you're using any vulnerable things in that. You know, people still use C, what about it? Vulnerability scanning, when I say this, like, you know, people are probably still doing this. You know, there are certain security teams that think this is all you need to do. But when I say vulnerability scanning in regards to the menu, I mean packaging up the report and handing it over to the teams. Some people are like, what are you doing? But they'll actually learn a lot of cool stuff. and again, visibility of their issues. Compliance scanning, this is another one. People are probably already doing a lot of this. I'm not saying that you change that. Had some really great success with Chef Automate, because your people are already using Chef, or whatever they're using, the Chef Automate, or your Chef pipeline. They're already running audits at the end of their spinning up their nodes, and you can just put your own little profile at the end of it. The idea with this is that it also empowers the developers to have access to their reports as well, and they're looking at it, and we all know that like you don't like seeing red in your reports, so you fix the thing. Cool. So I'd be lying if I said every single thing on that list has been successful, which is kind of one of the lessons I learned from trying to do the menu, in that just if something doesn't work, like try another thing. And even if you aren't capable of doing everything on that list, there'll be something on there that you can. So yeah, just start at the start. And let squads pick and choose what they want to do. This is probably a wider lesson, and is to build rapport with your teams. Like, don't be a dick. Like, you have to tell security people sometimes. They've probably had a bad experience with the security team before. They've probably had an operations guy jump up and down and like throw something at them. So you've got to build that trust back up. So yeah, some of those things in the education awareness thing can actually help with that. The last bit is really for the managers in the room. You're doing all this cool stuff, but you kind of got to show what you've done and prove it. Cool. So, oh my goodness. So thanks for listening. Special call out to Agile Application Security by Riley for a lot of the inspiration for the menu. Yeah, and sorry, do we have any questions?
What do you use to measure success?
That's a very good question. What do I measure for tracking? This is funny. I created a security metric. So there was like a sizing for each thing I did, like attending a stand-up is 1 point, and like giving them the report is another. Yeah, it's just, it's not continuous data, it's discrete data, so it's really just kind of showing what you've done rather than having a chart. Cool, thank you.